people underestimate the importance of internal communication.
Mm.
Internal communication is the cheat code for business, in my mind. There's literally no amount of internal communication that's too much. It is impossible to slake the thirst of the modern employee in terms of receiving communication.
They say it's lonely at the top. They're right. But you don't have to scale your company alone. Welcome to the Scaling CEO. I'm Glenn Gow, the CEO Success Coach. On this podcast, I sit down with top performing CEOs to uncover the hidden patterns and frameworks behind their success so you can avoid common pitfalls and accelerate your company's growth. Now, on to the show. Today, we're talking about the part of scaling that most CEOs get wrong, the people. We obsess over product market fit, sales funnels, and fundraising. But we often forget that companies don't scale, people do. And if your people aren't thriving, your company is dying. My guest, Tom Alexander, has spent his career at the intersection of people, policy, and technology. He's not your typical tech founder. His journey took him from the high stakes world of political communications for the mayor of Chicago to being the COO of 1871, one of the world's top tech incubators, where he helped hundreds of startups navigate the chaos of growth. Now, as the CEO and co-founder of Holistic, he's building technology to solve the very problem he saw cripple so many companies, a broken employee experience. Tom's work is focused on one powerful idea: creating fair, inclusive, and high-performing environments where everyone can reach their potential. If you want to learn how to scale your company's most important asset, your culture, then you need to listen closely to this conversation. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks. It's great to be here, Glenn. Appreciate you.
I found a great quote of yours. Culture isn't a ping pong table. It isn't free beer. Culture is how you feel when you come to work every day. I personally love that. Many CEOs think perks equal culture. When you were helping scale the massive ecosystem at 1871, the incubator, what was the moment you saw firsthand that this soft stuff of how people feel has the hardest impact on a company's bottom line?
Yeah. Before I get into the 1871 part, I'll tell you a quick story. We had a client at Holistic pre-COVID, and they were spending, this is not a joke, like $200,000 a year on snacks in their offices.
On what?
On snacks, on
On
like
snacks. Okay.
yogurt covered
I thought I
raisins and
missed
stuff
that.
like that. And they were getting killed for it on their employee surveys. The Boulder office has the white chocolate covered raisins, and we only have the dark chocolate covered, like stuff like that, right? Then COVID hits. Everybody goes home. There's no snacks. And the employee sentiment for that company goes through the roof
Wow.
because it wasn't ever about the snacks. The snacks were this vehicle through which people could complain about their employee experience, but what they really cared about was communication. And when they went home for COVID, all of a sudden this company had a watershed moment in terms of internal communication that tapped into what the employees really cared about. And
Ah,
I never forgot that because and we say it all the time in Holistic, we say it ain't about the snacks.
yeah.
And we saw the same thing at 1871. I mean, if you were ever at 1871, it was this vibrant place, colorful and exciting and whatever. And we had all the fun things, all the choice, all the diversions. But if you ask people what they loved about 1871, they all would tell you a story of a connection. A story
Ah,
of, I was sitting here talking to somebody about my challenge and somebody walked by and they introduced me to them and now we're X, Y, and Z. Or I attended this workshop and I met this person and that led to this conversation and now we're A, B, and C. And so, I think the lesson there is these other things are fun, but people are actually pretty well centered around what's truly important to them. And what's important to them are things like communication, transparency, opportunity, advancement, meaningful work.
right,
I love snacks. I truly do. I love ping pong. That's not why I show up at work.
right. That's right. And you're talking about
something that Daniel Pink talks about, which are the main motivators of employees, and most of those have nothing to do with compensation. There are many, many other ways of touching people, causing them to wake up in the morning to be excited to work for you, and you've touched on several of those.
Yeah. We talk about
So,
the pie chart, right? Like everybody has their own pie chart and it's constantly changing. And in fact, so the compensation is a wedge on your pie chart. So is your coworkers. So is your flexibility. So is the
right,
meaningfulness of your work. So are your benefits. If you ever meet anybody who went from not being a parent to being a parent, their wedge for benefits grew pretty dramatically, almost overnight. Takes
right,
about 9 months for that wedge to get really pretty sizable. And what we've learned is that calculus for each person is changing constantly. Sometimes 3 times a day, you might have a different set of prioritizations, but over time, it's very much moving in the direction of meaningful things.
right,
And that's where we're focused.
great. Now, at 1871, you had a front row seat to watch hundreds of companies try to scale. What's the one scaling insight about people and culture that if you could go back and tell those founders on day one would have saved them a lot of time and energy?
So I'm not sure it would save you time and energy, but I don't think that's the point of entrepreneurship or scaling, to save time or energy. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a different answer.
All right.
The
Okay.
the the advice that I would give people is to completely eradicate this part of your body where you think you can see the future. I see so many people, I saw it then, I see it now, people taking themselves out of opportunities because they look at it and they think, is this likely to lead to something? Is this person worth my time? You know, do they have any money to spend with us? All these questions that people ask themselves to convince themselves that whatever opportunity they have isn't worth their time, isn't worth their energy. And what we used to tell people at 1871 is look under every rock and every stone, answer every email, take every call, because you don't know where it's going to lead. Now, looking back on it, we have 2020 hindsight. Like that conversation led to this thing, which led to the opportunity of a lifetime. Our
Right.
biggest client ever at Holistic, this is a true story, got an email. It was like 10 p.m. on December 23rd. Got an email
Hmm.
saying, I have a client that's interested in people experience services. It's like really shady, right? And I read this like 6 times. I was like, this has got to be spam. Got to be spam. But I wrote him back because you never know who's going to bring you your future or when. And they wrote back and said, yeah, we're interested in talking. Actually spoke with them in the week between Christmas and New Year's.
Okay.
Took us a year and a half to actually bring on their client as a client. And that client has been our largest client for 3 years.
Wow.
And I've looked back on that initial email before, and any rational person would have said 10 p.m. on December 23rd, no name of a company, generic, whatever, totally vague, swipe left. And maybe their lives are fine. Who knows? But, I talk about that a lot to our team because that's sort of the attitude that I'm hoping that people have. And so this idea of saving time, I love saving time. I love saving money. I love improving efficiency and productivity. I love making better choices. But I don't like the idea of people taking themselves out of opportunity beforehand.
I love it. I love it. And this question may fit into what you just said. Your work at Holistic is all about improving the employee experience. Based on the data you see and the leaders you talk to, what's the single biggest blind spot most CEOs have about their own company culture as they grow?
So two, one is I think even now, even post COVID, people underestimate the importance of internal communication.
Mm,
Internal communication is the cheat code for business in my mind. There's literally no amount of internal communication that's too much. It is impossible to slake the thirst of the modern employee in terms of receiving communication. And I think a lot of the partners that we work with, when we talk with them, they feel like they're making a strong effort toward internal communication, but the message isn't getting through. It's a busy world. And so that's kind of one major pitfall.
Internal
The other one
communication.
is I think that people are way too outcomes driven and way too focused on outcomes and not nearly enough focused on process. And we're in a very process world, right? I mean, you go on Instagram and you'll see 1,000 videos about trust the process and Kobe Bryant, whatever, like process is having a moment right now. And I think one of the things that we've learned sort of as a society in the last 10, 20, 50 years is that you control the things that you can control and everything else plays out. And yeah, we see business leaders, particularly as it relates to their culture, fixated on trailing indicators. So our net promoter score is down. I want it to be up, right? You can't change your net promoter score overnight.
Right.
We're not hiring the right quality of people, or we have these, issues in terms of our workforce, or we have too much turnover, things like that. These are all challenges that we deal with. All things that you can't change overnight. What can you change overnight? In other words, I can have a hiring process that's not working for my company today, and guess what? It won't be working for my company tomorrow. I can have an inequitable hiring process today, a flawed hiring process today, and I can take a series of concerted actions today, and starting tomorrow, it can be fixed. Now, it's going to take some time for that renewed, rejuvenated hiring process to result in a thriving workforce, and there's obviously many other factors. But we see too many people fixated on this outcome and getting frustrated instead of saying, what can I control right now? You
Right.
can't change your turnover rate of your organization for the last 2 years, no matter what you do. But what you can absolutely do is endeavor to have your turnover rate from tomorrow and on be in line with what you want it to be. So that's another place where we're very much focused with talking with our partners.
That's great. I want to talk about internal communication for a moment, and I'm going to use a couple of examples. They may not align exactly with how you're thinking about it, but um, often I'm talking to CEOs about something they need to teach their leadership team, which is to give a lot more positive and specific feedback. And what I hear is, oh, well, if I do that, people are going to want to make more money. They're going to come to me for money. And I say that's actually not true. It's not proven. And in my experience, it rarely happens. What happens is that people are desperate for feedback. They want to understand when they're doing a good job. They want to understand what they just did that they can do more of so they can get that psychic reward. And that's one piece of communication that's missing. The second is around accountability. What I hear from many CEOs is, well, I'm worried if I'm too accountable with people that they'll be upset and they'll want to leave. And I say, well, this isn't about telling someone something bad. This is actually about creating a contract with someone. Hey, I've asked you, Tom, to do something. Are you willing to commit to do that? And then let's talk about whether or not you followed through or not. It's
Yeah.
a conversation. And what I find is people avoid both of these conversations far too often. And then employees are kind of lost because they're not getting the communication they need.
Uh, I guarantee you this will resonate with you. You go into a meeting with somebody, you give them a compliment, and at the end of it, they go, "Oh, I was afraid I was going to be fired." Have you been to this movie before?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You
Because
go
I
you
haven't
go to
heard
give
from you.
somebody you go to their performance review, and they got, fours across the board, and they're an outstanding employee. And at the end, they say, I didn't sleep last night. I was afraid I was going to be fired." And you're like, okay, that's actually really pretty problematic. But this happens all the time. Every single person who's listening to this has had this experience recently, right?
Yeah.
Didn't know what to expect out of this conversation, I thought. And so people are inured, Glenn, to thinking that bad things are going to happen. You didn't tell me what you really thought. And the reason why they feel that way, especially in the workplace, is they've had a hell of a lot of evidence to make them feel that way. So your job as a modern leader is doubly challenging. One is you have to do all the things that you said. And you're
Right.
right about every single aspect of it. And the second is you have to compete against all this other stuff that has infected people's worldview up to that point. And that's a huge challenge that I think people underestimate the difficulty of, which is you can be a great leader, you can be a great communicator, you can be a great interactor with somebody. And on some level, you're answering for their previous boss who wasn't that great.
Right. That's right.
And the quicker you recognize that as part of your challenge and your obligation, the more successful you'll be. To your point, I don't think the idea of you gave me a compliment, I asked for more money, that's not a real thing. That's a made up wives' tale, no evidence for that. That does
That's right.
not happen. And similarly, my boss told me that he made a mistake, or my boss held me accountable for making a mistake, ergo I'm going to leave. That's also bullshit. That doesn't happen either. So those are conceptions that people have made up to justify behaviors.
That's right.
They're not a real thing.
That's right. There's another dynamic here, especially with newer employees, which is that new employee brings their former cultural understanding with them. They don't know what this new culture is like. They don't know what the CEO is like or the leadership team is like. And they bring these understandings and beliefs with them. And it's incumbent upon the leadership of the company to help them understand the new culture. This is how we operate here. Here's why. And we want you to be part of that. And until people fully understand that, they're going to sort of bump up against the culture.
There's also a lot of people who've never worked before. This is their first job.
Right.
And they come in with all these preconceived notions, or they've never worked in an office before. This is my first time working in person.
Right.
And they come in with all these preconceived notions. You go on Instagram right now, there is a lot of what, in my opinion, is very, very bad professional advice being conveyed to young employees as to how it relates to interact with your employee. Cynical, kind of it's us against them type of stuff. And I get why there's people out there promoting that stuff. That's good for clicks.
Right.
And they're making their own business out of that.
Right.
But they're fomenting this dynamic that is the employee versus the employer. And my entire company is predicated on the idea that it's actually the employer and the employee sitting on the same side of the table looking at the world together. And so to your point, we are trying to indoctrinate, that's probably a loaded word. We are trying to teach the employees about our culture. But what we're really trying to do is we're trying to invite them to be a part of that culture,
Right.
bring their experiences and make their part of the quilt.
I really like that phrase, invite them to be part of our culture.
It's like, sometimes I tell people, they'll ask in an interview process, tell me about the culture. I say, I'm going to tell you about the culture, number one. Number two, we're going to connect you with our teammates and they'll tell you about the culture. But number three, and most importantly, you have a homework assignment, which is you need to go home and you need to imagine the culture after you've been here, after you've been a part of it. That's the challenge. It's not what culture am I coming into. It's what is the culture going to look like after I've been there? And
Wow,
people are, generally speaking, I think humble and not megalomaniacs. And so they don't think about the world in terms of like, I can't evaluate the culture until I've given consideration to my own impact on it.
that's
But they should.
powerful. That's very powerful. So great, Tom. As we wrap up here, I want to move into what everyone knows is my favorite topic, which is AI. So you have a company that uses data to measure inclusion and fairness, and yet we're really talking about the human side of business here. Where does AI fit into the way you run the company? Where does it fit into the offering you're providing to other companies? And how are you seeing it as a radical potential change to what you're doing in the near future?
Yeah. Total game changer. Completely powerful, totally misunderstood. Everything you already knew about AI, that's true in our industry as well. People are worried that AI is going to take their jobs, and that's the wrong thing to be thinking about, at least now. In my mind, what you should be worried about is the 32 hours a week or 35 hours a week where you're not operating at your highest best purpose and figuring out how you can leverage these incredible technologies to facilitate you being more efficient, more productive in your job, and you focusing on the things that only a human being can do.
Right.
Being creative, being impulsive, being empathic, being dynamic, being contrarian, all these different things that you can do with your time where you can free it up because you're spending a lot of time right now on things that you could leverage technology to do a little bit more easily.
That's
That's
right.
kind of part A. Part B is there's this idea, and this relates to the specific work that we do. There's this idea that like it takes a person to understand a person. And that is true. But if you take a concept, for example, like an exit interview or a stay interview, stay interviews are very interesting because I might sit down with an employee and I might ask them 10 questions, and they are going to give me the roadmap to making them happy if I do it. And not only that, they're going to give me probably some clues as to what other people's roadmap looks like. So that's worth it, right? That's worth it to do. Now the
Absolutely.
stay interview ends, and what happens? The person says, I got to run to another meeting. I've got all these notes that I need to type up. Maybe I'll get to that. I get to that next week. I can't remember what we were really talking about here, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I type it up. Oh, this is a pretty good idea. I should do something about that. X, Y, right? And it just takes time and time and time and time and time. And eventually it gets to a point where you actually lose the value of this.
Yeah.
And it's worse than not having done the interview in the first place because you made a contract. I made a contract with you, Glenn. I want to know how I can help you. And you're thinking you're going to try and help me. And if I'm not in a capacity to act upon that, then that's really pretty deleterious to your employee experience. Here's where AI comes in. At each different phase of that process, AI can streamline the capacity of the interviewer to take the data, the information, and turn it into action. That's really what AI can do. And AI can do that over and over and over again for you in a way that you never could as a person. So in this particular use case, which I think is a great example, AI actually offers you a capacity to be the best version of yourself that you could never accomplish on your own. And so that's the question that we kind of ask our people. That's the question that we ask the people that we work with, essentially, is these tools are incredible. Once we get past this ego-driven, only a person can do it type of thing, and start to think strategically about how we can leverage these tools to help us be the best version of ourselves, there's a lot of opportunity afoot. So I'm a big proponent of us investing the time and energy to figure this stuff out together and to take some of the energy that we're spending wrestling against it and being leery of it, and instead deploy that into how can we really use this to make all of our experiences better?
That's great. That's great. So I want to give you one last example before we wrap up. Something one of my CEOs did, and this CEO takes culture very, very seriously. Not only has written out the values, but gives examples every time he's communicating with the company about this is an action someone took that represents our values, and he documents this. So now, when he's preparing for an all hands meeting, he has a document that represents his values. He tells ChatGPT to read this and then evaluate my talk, the one I was about to prepare to give to the team, using the cultural values that are important to me, making sure that I'm holding these clear and front and center to everyone in the company. And I think it's a brilliant approach to ensure that the culture is sticking inside that company. So,
And
Tom, we have.
what's
Oh,
implicit in
go ahead.
that?
Last comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, what's implicit in that is an awareness on the part of that CEO that people are just horribly unreliable narrators about themselves. And so he's like, look, I'm obviously trying to live my values all the time, but I know I'm not. And using external technology to help us check that is obviously valuable. We do something similar, which is we'll take your organizational survey, or we'll take your organizational values and we'll take an employee survey
Okay.
where you didn't ask about the values. And we have a technology that allows us to measure your survey responses against your organizational
Oh,
values. Because if
nice.
I ask you, Glenn, if I say, are you transparent, accountable, positive, and
Of course.
hardworking, you're going to give yourself 10 out of 10 on all of them.
Right.
But what you'll tell me the answer to those questions without me asking it through your answers to other questions in your behavior and your commentary. And so we're able to say, look, this idea of positivity is just not something that we're doing very well with organizationally. We're very transparent. We're very action oriented. We're doing great on that. We're really struggling with positivity. That begets a whole sequence of conversations. It's kind of the same concepts, right?
Well,
Which
that's
is,
great.
I can't ask myself this because I'm going to fudge my own answer.
Right.
But I can ask a computer that, it will give me a dispassionate answer, and then I'm uniquely suited to use that information for progress.
That's beautiful. Great example. Thank you for sharing that. Tom, thank you so much for the discussion today. I've learned a lot. I'm sure the audience can take away a lot of things to help improve the performance of the company through culture, thanks to what you're doing. So tell the listeners how they can reach you.
Yeah. Holisticindex.com is our website. Tom at holisticindex.com is my email. We answer every email. We pick up every call. So we're glad to talk to anybody about any challenge that they have.
Fantastic. Tom, thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
That's a wrap for today's episode of The Scaling CEO. If you found this valuable, be sure to like, subscribe, and share with a fellow CEO who could benefit. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please give us a quick rating as it really helps more people find the show. I'm Glenn Gow, the CEO Success Coach. See you next time for more proven strategies to grow your business and leadership.